cultural and intellectual initiatives, Sarai lost substantial funding. And I think that this is a question that one has to ask about cultural, intellectual initiatives independently in India, as to what are the resources that can sustain them. And since that question could not be resolved, we thought it best to at least to diminish our involvement with it, so that if it continued, it could continue as a smaller scale program.
I think art is a form of expression for an artist. It is so personal, it's inspiring, thought-provoking. It's like a language in itself that can be interpreted in so many different ways, and I believe can change lives. I am so in awe of all the artists that I have chatted with in this series, and I have personally learned and gained so much from each conversation. And I hope you do the same. So happy listening. Hi everyone. Today I am in conversation with Shuddhabrata Sengupta, who is the founder of Raqs Media Collective. His partner Monica Nerula was meant to join this conversation, but apparently she's stuck on a train somewhere in France, and so I'm sure she's having a good time, even though she's stuck on the train. But thank you so much for joining me, Shuddha. And just a very brief introduction on Raqs Media Collective, right, which is an agency that practices across several media, like installation, sculpture, video, performance, curation, and all of that. So of course we're going to hear from Shuddha. So thank you once again for joining me today.
Thank you, Payal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, great. So maybe we can start with your background before, and so that's one. And the second part of the question would be, how did you come about setting up Raqs Media?
Right. The three of us in Raqs Media Collective, that is Monica Nerula, Jesh Bagchi, and me, met in a film school in Delhi at the Jamia Millia Islamia University in the late 1980s, actually 1989. And we were students together at the Mass Communication Research Center. And we were at time interested and receiving an education in documentary, film, and video production, which is what we set out to do. And the three of us grew up primarily in Delhi, although Monica had an itinerant childhood. She traveled different places in India and in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific Islands with her father, who was a school teacher. But Jibesh and I, born and raised in Delhi, and we received our education entirely in Delhi, so we are very Delhi people. We studied different things. I studied sociology, Monica studied English literature, Jibesh studied physics and then sociology, and then we met at this master's program at the Jamia Millia Islamia University. And having graduated from there, we enjoyed working together, so we decide to do things together. So it was out of a friendship and out of a desire to pursue however much we wanted to make a life with moving images, with signs, with thinking with the moving image. That's how Raqs was formed in the November, if I'm not mistaken, of 1992. So we are almost 31 years old now as a collective.
Interesting. And I guess you mentioned that, you know, your background in terms of education, all three of you, it was so different that you were able to bring all of it, sort of amalgamated into Raqs, you know, so bring all your different ideologies and collectively be in one space. So that's interesting. So what does Raqs Media Collective as a collective actually do?
Our practice is primarily in contemporary art. We started as filmmakers, as documentary filmmakers, but around 2000, we found ourselves increasingly invited to contemporary art venues. And today, our practice is entirely in contemporary art as artists. So we are a contemporary art collective, but we also curate exhibitions. And we've curated several large international exhibitions. We write a lot as a part of our practice, and we also teach in different platforms, in different situations, in different contexts,
And
in many places in the world.
What is it that you teach?
I think we are invited often to work with young artists in art academies where the task that we undertake or our approach for is to work with the thinking processes. How do artists ask questions? How do they pursue their curiosities, which is what we've been doing together for 30 years, and how to shape their practice into a mode of thinking, research, curiosity, questioning, and exercise of the imagination. That's what we're often asked to do.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you think that visual art influences the other art forms like performing arts or cinema? Do you think visual art, from your point of view and perspective, does it have an influence on these other art forms?
Yeah, I think the entire universe of art production today is very porous. So, like, we came from initially a cinema background into contemporary art, and we still work with the moving image. So our formation in cinema and our love for the moving image has grounded everything that we do. But we also work a lot with architects, we work with software programmers, we work with designers, we work with performers, with theater directors. So our practice has many windows through which other practices, other art forms, other intelligences, I think we are in conversation. So the emphasis that we would like to place is on that conversational exchange between one art practice, however it defines itself, and the many other artistic, intellectual, creative influences that lie around it.
Okay. Yeah. That's you're right when you say that, you know, today it's very, very porous. No, that makes a lot of sense. So while I was researching you, I saw that you founded something called Sarai.
That's right.
And what is Sarai? Sarai actually means
Sarai.
It actually means like, is it a corner, or is it by the roadside, or what exactly does Sarai mean?
In many Asian languages that range from, let's say, Turkish to Persian to Urdu to Bengali and other languages, the word Sarai suggests a resting place where travelers who have all been on long distance journeys rest for a while. They refresh themselves. They find provisions. They exchange stories. They make new alliances, new friendships. So it can be anything from an inn to a public house, to a site, to a watering hole, to a campsite in an oasis in the desert. To, for instance, in Istanbul, the Topkapi Saray is a palace, right? So which may have begun as a. So there are cities, for instance. I mean, Sarajevo in Bosnia comes from the word Sarai. And in many places in India and Pakistan, you will find the word Sarai as a suffix to a place name, like Mughal Sarai, or and Delhi itself has about 21 neighborhoods that have the word Sarai in them. The last we counted on the map. So Delhi, the city that we grew up in, was in some sense a city of Sarais. It was a spot on a busy, active route for travelers, pilgrims, merchants, itinerant folk of all kinds. And the culture of the city and the historical identity of the city is formed by these intersections So which is why we took the word Sarai. And Sarai was a program, or was, and to some extent is a program at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, which is an independent think tank in Delhi. And it was founded by the three of us and two theorists, Ravi Sundaram and Ravi Vasudevan, as a kind of, let's say, interdisciplinary platform for research and practice that looked at this new city or the new urban condition in South Asia, new technologies, and new cultures of living, practicing, imagining the creative and intellectual life. So it was a very active program for the 12 years that we were associated with it. We founded it in 2000, worked with it actively to 2012. We ran media labs, a publication program, residencies, fellowships. We gave about 600 fellowships. A lot of the people that you see in contemporary art, performance, filmmaking, literature, journalism in South Asia came through the Sarai program in one form or the other. So it left a certain kind of mark on contemporary culture in I'd say South Asia as a whole.
Okay, and you are not as associated with it as you were when you founded it.
No, we're not, because like many things in India, like many interesting cultural and intellectual initiatives, Sarai lost substantial funding. And I think that this is a question that one has to ask about cultural intellectual initiatives independently in India, as to what are the resources that can sustain them. And since that question could not be resolved, we thought it best to at least to diminish our involvement with it, so that if it continued, it could continue as a smaller scale program.
Right, right. So why do you think that, you know, these kind of initiatives are not given the rightful support? You know, because there is a lot of there's a lot of different industrial, you know, or industries, or different industrialists who, from what we read, are involved in, you know, in supporting foundations. And so is that more from a CSR perspective, or, you know, is it like they genuinely care? And if they don't genuinely care, is that the reason why support for these kind of initiatives? Because they're very, they do make a difference, you know, like, for example, what you've said about Sarai and how it helped so many contemporary artists by offering fellowships. So do you think that it is something which needs more of a drive and a push? And why is it not to the extent that it is in other parts of the world?
Well, it's a complicated and a difficult question you've asked. I'm going to try and respond to it with as much candor and sincerity as possible. I think there are 2 or 3 factors that we have to keep in mind. First of all, I think in India at the moment, but not just at the moment, for considerable amounts of time, there hasn't been the support that you would expect from the state in a democratic society for cultural and intellectual production. There are various restraints placed on these activities, which do not behove a democratic society. And it's not just now, it's also in the past. So it's not just one regime or another regime. I think it's a general condition. For instance, there is a very repressive law called the Foreign Contributions Regulation Act, which inhibits international support and solidarity for the arts and culture and academic life, or in intellectual life. I don't think that's well known enough in the world, that India has the kind of law that you would expect in places like Russia or China or Iran. We have the same legal system that actually prohibits and disinhibits intellectual cooperation and exchange, and cultural cooperation and exchange. Secondly, since the state has failed in its responsibility in this regard, one would expect civil society or private initiatives to pick up the slack through foundations, as you mentioned, or through philanthropic activity. My understanding and experience is that that has never acquired the robustness and the maturity that a culture and country with the complexity and scale that India has. There's a lot of talk, but I haven't seen that translated into robust enough action in support of different initiatives. There are a few organizations like the India Foundation for the Arts, the Tata Trusts do some work, but they're stretched beyond their capacities. There's no shortage of wealth in this country. There's a lot of wealthy individuals, corporations, and they do have CSR policies, but I don't think they go the distance in trying to do what is necessary to be done. And I'm saying this not because I'm wanting to be critical of the society I'm a part of. I'm saying it based on an understanding that is comparative in relation to countries and situations that are similar, let's say like Mexico or Turkey or Indonesia or Brazil or Argentina, which are all contexts with which I'm familiar. I'm not talking purposefully, I'm not talking about wealthy European countries or North American countries. I'm talking about countries that are comparable in terms of their economic and social heft with India. And I've seen that in these countries, there is much more responsible support for art and culture and for, culture, intellectual life generally from within society than there is in India. I think those people who are listening to your podcast in India might do well to reflect on why this is the case.
Okay, yeah, I hope so too, because I think it's such a rich country with richness in terms of culture, in terms of the arts, and if there isn't enough support, a lot of talent, in order for them to progress, do need that financial support as well. So I hope that I hope I can contribute through this particular episode to people who are listening in, to actually hear you out. And as you said, also reflect on it. I think it's a very important conversation to be had. And I hope, it's unfortunate that you had constraints and therefore could not be persistent with Sarai. But I guess as a collective, you do need support, external support as well. So I completely understand that. But then it's an example of how people like yourselves who had the idea and who are you're kind of thinking ahead and you're actually trying to contribute and support art in India in whatever sphere, and you didn't get enough of that support. So I hope there are people listening in. Let's move back to Raqs Media Collective. So what are some of your projects that have really, because you kind of work with contemporary art, but you also into film and things like that, documentaries. What are some of the projects that you really held close to your heart, or that have kind of stayed with you as a collective?
Well, in a 32-year-old practice, it's hard to.
No, so if you can
say that
I know, I get that.
Yes,
just a couple of
Yeah, but I think that and the main thing is that we meet every day I mean, right now I'm at our studio. People who are working in the studio are here. Jibesh, my other partner, who is, again, couldn't join the program podcast because we are busy editing a new work. He's in the editing room. There's an everydayness to our preoccupations and to our conversations that have been going for 30 years. And some of these have to do with subjects and themes that we are fascinated with, like time. What does time do to us, and what do we do to time? The question of what makes for an embodied intelligence. I mean, this is a question that we have to ask ourselves all the time, because we're three people, and the artist is not one of us as human beings, but the intelligence that lies at the intersection of our curiosity. So that makes us think. It makes us think about everything from artificial intelligence to storytelling techniques and practices, to how narratives grow. For instance, how does the Mahabharata grow in our culture as a set of interlinked, hyperlinked, entities? So time, telling stories, language, these are all very important to us. The city as the ground of our practice, Delhi itself and the urban condition, both in general terms, these are important. So, I mean, I could think of, let's say, a work that we made called Provisions for Everybody, which is a long film work, and it's basically following. It's like somewhere between a road movie and a philosophical reflection, which looks at coal and energy and traces the journeys of a writer that we've always admired, George Orwell, from his place of birth in Motihari in eastern India, in Bihar, to his meditation on coal country in northern England. Or we could talk about another film work of ours called Blood and Stars, The Blood of Stars, which looks at iron in the blood and in the earth and in the stars, looks at elements and substances. So we're very curious about materials, for instance. Right now, we're working on a film that will have its inaugural screening and passage in a place called Cosmic House in London, which is the house of the architectural historian and theorist Charles Jenks, who gave us the word postmodernism, and he did that in the year 1980. So this is a meditation on the year 1980, which is a year that the three of us grew up in. Right. And it seems like a year in which nothing happened. So we're trying to think about that nothing that happens in every year, and how that allows us to unlock the secrets of a passage of time or an experience of time. We also work a lot with language. So we're making a series of works that look at book titles and insects. There's one right in front of me. There also is a work that we're making, a large public commission at the moment, for a library in the Goethe University in Frankfurt, which takes the declaration of the UN Human Rights Declarations, all humans are born free and equal, and turns that around into a video sculpture in a very interesting language from West Africa. So there's all sorts of things that we're doing or have done at any given point of time that make us that extend our curiosities, shall we say.
That's fascinating, and that I guess that keeps you going as well. Thank you so much. It's just been really interesting talking to you, and it's a pity that Monica couldn't join, but we could have another conversation at another time.
Sure.
And and get more reflections from you. It's just been wonderful, and I really appreciate you talking to me and taking the time to do that. Thank you. For more weekly conversations, do listen to Melting Pot on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts. Follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Podcast Melting Pot. So until the next episode, this is Payal signing off.